On this video, I just want to talk briefly about, this is a Mosky. The power station. Okay, so I was using, and see, I had this, I think it was a misunderstanding that you could have, for instance, a 300 milliamp power supply and supply any number of pedals that were 300 milliamps and below. But what I've read later was that you need to add up the milliamps of your pedals, and all of them combined should be less than half of the milliamp rating of your power supply. So I was running like a 300 milliamp, and for most pedals that's fine. I think I could get into trouble with a couple of them. They're sucked down 200 milliamps. Most of them are eating about 20 milliamps, 10 milliamps, 30 milliamps, somewhere in there. Well, I was using that 300 milliamp pedal, wall wart, and then daisy chaining to all my pedals, and I was having a lot of noise problems, if you might have seen in some of my demo videos. Now you're going to say, that's great, you know, that you got the power station, but it's not isolated, which, as far as I know, means that you have the equivalent of a small wall wart inside of every socket, isolated power. It's kind of like when I used to have scale extracts, and you would race your slot cars around, and you can make a guy crash in the corner by slowing down, because it would give him an energy surge because both cars were sharing the same power supply on the track. So what I did was I hand wired every lane to have its own individual power supply, so you weren't affected by what other drivers were doing. Okay, moving right along, that's what I believe an isolated power supply is. You get the equivalent of a wall wart, a converter, an adapter inside of every socket, right? Okay, so it's not that quality. It's only 40 bucks though. And what you do get is a 1 amp wall wart that's capable of powering a 12 volt and 18 volt pedal, in case you have any of those. And it gives 100 milliamps to every one of these, the first 7 sockets, and it gives 500 milliamps to socket number 8. So if you have a 9 volt pedal, that, like the Vertube, not the Vertube, that's an amplifier, but the Behringer VT911, that thing sucks down like 300 milliamps, I believe. So that could go here. I think I have 1 or 2 other pedals that do that, but I don't know which ones they are. I am careful to check though when I'm assembling a pedal chain. Anyway, this thing is pretty cool. A lot of my noise problems went away. I think I was just overloading a wall wart, a 300 milliamp, maybe even a 500 milliamp. I think it was honestly, I think it was a 300 milliamp wall wart that I was overloading. Everything plugs in real nicely into here. Plus, it has the option for 12 and 18 volt. Now, the milliamp specs, that's another peeve. Well, it would be great for isolated power, but I don't think you're going to get that for 40 bucks. But my peeve is, you know, they should have a little bracket here. Little bracket from there, channel 7, down to channel 1, you know, over the top. It should say 100 milliamps. And then another little line coming up off the 8th one, 500 milliamps, and, you know, and the voltage, 9 volt. To be really clear, you know, as to what is what. But you can look the specs up, which is what I did. Interestingly, or oddly enough, This thing showed up with zero documentation. It arrives with several of these. You know, that's another thing. You don't have any hanging loose like you do on a daisy chain, where you need to either find a makeshift covering device or buy a daisy chain that has little plastic things that go on the ones you're not using. There's another solution where you can plug them in one by one. The daisy chain, the outlets. I forget what it's called. Okay, so my only other peeve with this, and I also read about this in an Amazon review, is that the wall wart itself has a pretty short cord. From about there. Yeah, over there to there. It's a pretty short cord. Maybe 3 or 4 feet. If they expanded that to be like a 7-foot cord, that would be really cool. What I had to do was plug in a power strip into the wall wart, into this strip. Okay, then there's one last piece. The input is on the front. It would be really cool if the input were on the back, you know, from the wall wart. You know, if it were back here somewhere. But this has been a huge improvement over what I was using before. And I just wanted to talk about it. It's about 40 bucks. There's a bunch of them. But I'd say, you know, don't let the people saying, well, it's not isolated power, don't let them scare you away. It can work. But ideally, that would be great if you had a separate power supply for every pedal, isolated power. That would be incredible, but I think those start costing $100, $150, $200. All right.